G'day guys, how are we? Welcome back to the Boxing Deep Dive channel. This is the weekly roundup. It is Friday, February 16th, 2024. And I say it every week, but it always seems to be the case. Plenty going on in the world of boxing, both here in Australia and overseas. Probably the biggest news of the week, arguably, but in my opinion, dropped on Monday night is the launch of the Premier Boxing Series. Now, it will be officially announced on or launched on February 21st in Brisbane, but is the brainchild of Angelo DiCarlo and Ace Boxing along with Seven Mate. So big news. Again, we don't know the full particulars yet, but what it looks like is at the moment is that there'll be 12 shows per year as well as a weekly boxing show. So talk about throwing a cat amongst the pigeons. The first event will be March 27, and already a lot of Australia's young stars have been linked to the promotion. But it also goes along the ways or in conjunction with No Limit, of course, who have the Fox, KO, and Main Event deal. You got Tasman Fighters who have the DAZN deal, and then the newcomers Icons Entertainment, who are with Stan Sport. So it really makes things very interesting over the next, well, probably couple of years with all these contracts, because I think I said in my Instagram post earlier in the week that the Ace Boxing organisation, if you want to call it, has been around a long time. Angelo DiCarlo has a lot of experience in the industry, and the fact that he's linked up with a free-to-air mainstream TV channel, even though it is the secondary channel, is massive news on the Australian front. And it's interesting that since the No Limit contract with Fox, KO, and Main Event was announced, there has been a bit of an outcry about the fact they have a monopoly in this country when it comes to boxing on TV. But now we have another three players along with this Ace Boxing and 7 Plus with Tasman and Icons. Haven't seen a lot from Tasman Fighters yet on the DAZN network, so we'll have to see what is going to happen there. But Icons Entertainment has got an event coming up, which I'll touch on in a little while. But yeah, really interesting with the TV streaming wars, I suppose you might want to call it. There's a bit of a power struggle going on. Battle lines are being drawn, and hopefully it is the Australian fight fans that reap the benefit of that. The only probably misgiving I have with the whole thing is that a little bit like our friends in the US with the different networks, is that each organisation and network will have a stable of fighters, and they'll be great fighting each other, but maybe not so much as fighting fighters from other stables. That's probably the only downfall. But look, it's the same all over the world, so Australia won't be any different. But this is at least a start that as fight fans here in Australia, we're going to have multiple avenues to see the best boxing content available. And if I know, knowing a little bit about Angelo DiCarlo and Ace Boxing, they will definitely throw, as I said, the cat amongst the pigeons, or a monkey in the wrench, or whatever they call it these days, and will make things very, very interesting. Let's see what Tasman and Icons can do as well. A little few whispers around this week as far as the Kambosos Lomachenko undercard goes. It's been previously reported that Shanika Johnson will fight on that for the, I think it's the WBA bantamweight title, the vacant belt. I can't actually remember who the opponent was, so forgive me about that. But there is going to be 3 world title fights on the card in total, and now it looks like Jason Maloney will defend that WBO bantamweight title against Filipino Raymart Gaballo. So Jason Maloney 27-2. Gaballo 26-1, so very similar records. Gaballo, strangely, is only ranked number 56 on BoxRec, but is the WBO mandatory challenger, so ranked number 1. So there has been a little bit of criticism about that ranking. I, for one, don't really take a lot of notice of the BoxRec rankings. I think they're so skewed as far as with algorithms and all this other stuff goes. All you got to do is look at the current pound-for-pound top 10. That'll tell you that. So Jason Maloney, he's had a voluntary defense last time against Sanchez. So like or not, he has to fight Gaballo in his mandatory. And I think it'll be a tough fight for Jason. Does make sense also for the promoters, of course, that Gaballo is a Filipino. A lot less in costs to get him over here to Australia. So I for one, think it's going to be a great fight. Jason just meeting his obligations with Gaballo and being the number 1 ranked challenger. And hopefully we might see a unification fight with Manuel Rodriguez down the track. but or maybe even a match against Nakatani, who of course beat his brother Andrew. So plenty of options for Jason going forward, but he will have, well, as I said, he will have this fight on the Kambosos Lomachenko undercard on May the 12th here in Australia in Perth. Interesting, I've seen a interview with Tim Tszyu in the last couple of days. He's obviously over in Las Vegas training for the Keith Thurman fight, the T-Mobile Arena on March 30th. He was actually asked about his time in Las Vegas and his arch nemesis, of course, Michael Zarafa. Firstly, on the Las Vegas scene, he did say that, of course, he still loves Australia or loves fighting in Australia, but has got a different type of rush being in the Las Vegas bubble, I suppose you'd call it, in the fishbowl over there, and just hit a little bit differently to being here in Australia. Obviously, he does love being an Australian and fighting here, but I don't blame him as far as the Las Vegas scene goes. He's now hit the big time. So I think it's going to be a little while before we see him back in Australia. And I can't blame him for really, taking to that American/Las Vegas, razzmatazz that they have over there. So as I said, I don't think we'll be seeing him back here in Australia for quite some time now that he's got a taste of the big time and the bright lights in Las Vegas. The other interesting point was Michael Zarafa was actually brought up about how did he feel about sharing the card with Michael Zarafa, and it was a little bit interesting in Tim's response. He said, firstly, he has no plans whatsoever to fight Michael Zarafa at any stage. He sort of moved on from that. He did wish Michael Zarafa all the best, which is great. They are professional athletes, by the way, but he actually did mention that he actually felt sorry for Michael Zarafa, and I sort of was taken aback a little bit and wondered why he would feel sorry for Michael Zarafa, and his response was, well, Michael Zarafa's finally got the big opportunity fighting for a world title, and he's buried on the card on the Tim Tszyu undercard. So look, just still taking some swipes at Michael Zarafa, but I thought it was interesting to more note that he doesn't see Michael Zarafa in his sights down the track. Now, that quite possibly could change if Tim decides he wants to go to the middleweight division, of course, and Michael Zarafa holds that WBA belt. Well, of course, he's going to look at Michael Zarafa. But from Tim's mouth, he said, look, it's big business back in Australia, but here, going forward, it doesn't really mean a lot in the context of my career, but things can change very quickly, especially if Michael gets his hands on that WBA belt and Tim maybe wants to go through there on his way to maybe a potential Canelo Alvarez fight or someone else. So just thought that was interesting. If you haven't seen it, check out the Fox Sports website. It's on there. A couple of cards announced. This is again goes back to the earlier announcement about the other streaming services and other promotions, big promotions coming on board. This one is on Wednesday, April the 3rd in Adelaide. Now, this is Jackson John England will be taking on former world champion Jamel Herring, the American. So that's in Gather Round in Adelaide. That's part of the AFL Gather Round weekend where all 18 teams play in Adelaide against each other in supposedly neutral games. But on the undercard of that event will be Joel Camilleri fighting Joel Pavlidis. Also on that card will be Jack Brubaker and Benjamin Bomber. Alex Leopold Jr. will be on there as well, making his debut, as well as I think there was 4 footy fights as well. So Sam LaBruna throwing his hat in the ring as far as the big promotions go. And not necessarily with a streaming service at the moment, but who knows what Sam LaBruna can pull out of his hat in regards to this event as well as others going forward. The other one I wanted to touch on is Saturday, March 23. It's in Ipswich, Queensland. Now, this is the Fist and the Furious. This is the Icon Sport promotion on Stan Sport. Now, you've got Paulo Acuso fighting Emmanuel Danso. Acuso 6-0 against Danso, 35-7. That's over 10 rounds at light heavyweight. Also on that card, Desley Robinson will fight Kay Scott for the Australian female middleweight title. Desley Robinson 5-2, Kay Scott 1-0. And also on that card is Jason Malia, who's 7-0. Still with a to be announced opponent. That fight will be over 6 rounds. So Icons Entertainment in conjunction with Stan Sport also getting busy as well. So as I said earlier, some really interesting times when it comes to all these streaming services. Big news with one of the other big, or probably the biggest promoter in Australia at the moment is No Limit, of course. Matteo Tapia has signed a deal to be on the roster. Tapia is managed by Mike Altamura. Has been sort of doing his thing overseas, but obviously now will be back in Australia working with No Limit. So good to see they've added him to their stable. The roster was looking a little shallow, if you ask me, but having Tapia sign on will definitely strengthen their stable. Onto the world scene, big fight announced this week. Devin Haney will defend his WBC 140-pound title against Ryan Garcia on April 20th in Las Vegas. No venue announced yet, but the odds are it will probably be T-Mobile Arena or maybe the MGM Grand, I would think. Interesting that there is no rehydration clause in the contract. Now, we all know that Ryan Garcia gave away the farm when he fought Gervonta Tank Davis and paid the penalty. He was stopped, of course, in that fight. Same thing to some extent with Devin Haney with a no rehydration clause, because Haney has been known to rehydrate up to 165 pounds. That is 30 pounds heavier than his former lightweight limit, and of course 25 pounds over the 140-pound division limit. So it's interesting that he's given in again, but again, that was probably the only reason why Haney agreed to the fight. But I, for one, really welcome the fight. I don't welcome all the hoo-ha that's already started, and God knows what we're going to have to put up with in the lead up to this fight. I think this fight is strong enough to stand on its own as a quality event and not need all the hoo-ha that goes on with this. We've seen it, the push and shove and the teams getting into it, all that sort of stuff. I think this fight's big enough. We don't need that, but I've got a feeling it's only the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to see over the next couple of months. Big fight this weekend, the WBC Super Featherweight Championship fight. O'Shaquie Foster, 21-2, will defend that belt against Abraham Nova, who's 23-1. That's in New York. Will be shown on ESPN, but I don't think it will be shown here in Australia. Fingers crossed it will be. But I think a really, really good fight, that one. And Foster, of course, coming off probably fight of the year last year against Hernandez. I think that's a great fight. Good fight anyway against Abraham Nova. I think it'll be entertaining while it lasts, and I've got a feeling that O'Shaquie Foster will be successful in that event, that fight, and get over the top of Nova, possibly by decision or late round stoppage. We also had a big, I suppose you could call it a big announcement this week with the announcements there with Canelo Alvarez. Now, it was leaked that he was going to make, as I just said, a major announcement in regards to his career. All that was said was he will be fighting on May the 4th against an American opponent. Now, if you break it down, there's probably only a couple that fit the description. Of course, Jamal Charlo was the favourite, but you could probably throw in there Terence Crawford as well, and maybe a David Benavidez. No Mexicans will be entertained, so I'm thinking that sort of rules Benavidez out. Even though he is American-born, he does have, obviously, the Mexican heritage. Jamal Charlo is also confirmed that he hasn't been approached about fighting Canelo on May the 4th. So maybe he's just not kept in the loop by his management. But does this point to maybe a Terence Crawford fight with Canelo Alvarez on May the 4th? I've got a sneaking feeling we might just get a Alvarez and Crawford fight, which would be great. I know a lot of people saying that Crawford doesn't have a chance going from 147 to 168. I do differ in that opinion. I think he's such a good fighter that he gives Canelo Alvarez a fight at 168 and possibly even beats Canelo Alvarez. So we'll have to keep looking for that one. It's got to be announced, you would think, in the next couple of weeks. It is only a couple of months away. So we'll keep looking at that with bated breath. Canelo Alvarez, 60 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws. The other fight that has been announced, or one fight that has been announced that's coming up, is the rematch between Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall. That fight will take place on April 27 in Leeds, England, at the First Direct Arena. So Josh Taylor, 19-1, coming off the loss to Teofimo Lopez, where he lost his WBO 140-pound title. Catterall's coming off a couple of good wins. He beat Darrell Foley last year, as well as Jorge Linares. So a couple of good scalps under his belt there. Taylor hasn't fought since losing to Teofimo Lopez in June last year. So I like the fight. Of course, these two did fight to a controversial decision in February 2022 when Josh Taylor successfully defended that undisputed title against Catterall, and now he gets his opportunity for revenge. And the trash talk's already started, so I'm sure leading up to April 27th, you'll see more and more of that. The last fight, of course, was in Glasgow, Scotland. This one in England, so on Catterall's home turf. I, for one, think Taylor gets the job done again, but good to see at least him giving Catterall an opportunity to get revenge. Another little bit of news I saw this week was Eddie Hearn offering Gervonta Davis $10 million to fight Conor Benn. Now, still don't know why Tank Davis would be entertaining a fight with Conor Benn. He is a 135-pound fighter. Conor Benn is a big, solid 147-pound fighter. Davis still obviously has the skills to beat Conor Benn, but is it a risk that's really worth taking? There's so many good fights for Davis around 135 to 140. I'm not sure why he would be looking at Conor Benn. Of course, $10 million is a lot of money, but is that just Eddie Hearn talking it up, or has he legitimately offered Gervonta Davis that amount of money? Davis is 29-0. Conor Benn is 23-0. Of course, they've already started the theatrics with the back and forth on social media. Let's just wait and see what happens there. As I said, I just think there's too many big fights for Davis around 135 to 140 to contemplate it, but money talks, as they say. To finish up, I've got a couple of, we'll call it jokes of the week as usual. The first is Shakur Stevenson. I think he had a 2-week retirement. Well, he is back. He's going to come back bigger than ever in June. Now looking for the biggest fights possible. It's amazing how quickly the attitude changes, doesn't it? When people pretty much forgot about him over those 2 weeks, well, he's back. So Shakur Stevenson to return in June. And let's see who that is against. And the other one just happened in the last sort of day or so on Probox TV. Now, if you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. It's a really, really good channel. It's got Paulie Malignaggi, Chris Algieri, Tim Bradley, numerous other people on there. It's a really good watch, lots of good content. Well, Paulie Malignaggi and Chris Algieri had the little face-off on the weekly segment, and they were asked who the all-time greatest fighter is at 140. Now, neither one of them even mentioned Costa Tszyu. I think Malignaggi went for who was Aaron Pryor, Chris Algieri, after sort of semi-joking that maybe it should be him. Chris, wake up to yourself, mate. You know, we're not even in the mix. He might have mentioned that maybe Chavez was in there, but the fact that they've not mentioned the one and only former undisputed 140-pound champion, Costa Tszyu, pretty much takes out our joke of the week. So there it is, all the news to hand as we speak. Of course, this again is Friday, February 16th. I'm sure there'll be something else that comes to hand just after I've recorded this or a day after. It always seems to happen, but that's it at this stage. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.